Greetings and welcome to the introduction to astronomy. In this week's exploration of the solar system, we are going to talk about the Clementine spacecraft and its exploration of parts of our solar system. So what was Clementine? Well, it was also known as the Deep Space Program Science Experiment. And we see it here before launch as it's in preparation. And it was launched on January 25th of 1994. Now, the whole idea of it was to study a couple of different objects, and it was going to study our moon and an asteroid known as Geographos. And that would be an asteroid actually classified as a near Earth asteroid, or one that passes closer to Earth. And this was actually intended to fly the craft within a very close distance of it to be able to get some up close images studying that. So it started off with going to the moon and going into lunar orbit and doing lunar mapping. And that started about 1 month after the launch. It actually finished that mission and then was sent out of lunar orbit and back to Earth. And unfortunately, at that point, there was a malfunction in the control thrusters that put it into a permanent spin, making it unable to reach the asteroid. Or, well, it could have gotten to the asteroid, but it wouldn't have been able to do any kind of significant science there because it had exhausted a lot of its maneuvering fuel. One of the control thrusters fired for much too long of a time, using up all of the fuel that was there and putting the craft into a spin. But we were able to get some things out of it. And some of the things that were observed were things looking at the moon. And one of the things it did was to look for water in the polar regions. Here actually is one of the images where it mapped the moon. But one of the interesting findings was that Clementine found water, or at least water ice. You can't have liquid water on the surface of the moon, but water ice is possible, and some water in the lunar polar regions. Now, unfortunately, this has been challenged. It's not necessarily correct as to the amount of water that it was thought to have been found there. So for a while we thought there might have been more water, actually significant amounts. And it turns out that now there may be less than we actually thought, and maybe not enough to actually help keep a human settlement on the moon going. Because one of the biggest problems with going to the moon would be water, having to be able to come up with sources of water or to bring water from Earth for astronauts living on the moon. So that would be one of the biggest problems. Now, it also did, using LiDAR, did a relief map of the surface. And we can take a look at that here. And here is an example of that, looking at the various distances. So getting kind of an elevation map of the moon. So the higher areas up there in the red, and you can see those, and you can see the darker areas in the blue and purple colors there. Now this is the entire lunar surface. So the near side would be the central part of this image, and the far side would be the two edges as they would wrap around. And the polar regions, of course, are very distorted there, which happens when you try to put something that is spherical onto a flat map. Something has to be distorted, and in this case it happens to be the poles. So but we could get that, and you get a very accurate image. So even though it was not able to finish its mission and go to the asteroid, we were able to get a good relief map of the surface and observe the moon also in the infrared and ultraviolet. Now, when it was unable to continue on its mission, it was actually sent in through the Van Allen radiation belts to give us some more information from those, even though it could not continue on to study the asteroid. So let's go ahead and finish up with our summary. And what we've looked at today is the Clementine satellite, used to map our moon and planned for the study of a near Earth asteroid. It was able to map the moon and potentially detected ice in the polar regions, although the amount is now in question as to how much was detected there. But a spacecraft malfunction in the engine prevented it from continuing to the asteroid. So that concludes this discussion on the Clementine spacecraft. We'll be back again next week for another exploration of the solar system video. So until then, Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.